work and her presence has been very close to us at Prakriti over the years. And just to reflect a bit about her poetry, which has been widely anthologized and featured in collections such as the Blood Axe Book of Contemporary Indian Poets and the Penguin Book of Indian Poets. Her book, This Kind of Child, The Disability Story, published by Westland, is a book about disability experience. Srilata's books include 5 collections of poems, including 3 women in a single room house, the anthologies The Rapids of a Great River, the Penguin Book of Tamil Poetry, and a short fiction from South India, amongst others. Her novel, Table for Four, was longlisted in 2009 for the Man Asian Literary Prize. Her most recent collection of poems, titled Footnotes to the Mahabharata, which we are delighted to launch this evening, the research for which was supported by the India Foundation for the Arts. She has been a writer at residence in the University of Stirling, Scotland, at Yon Hui Art Space in Seoul, and at the Sangam House. Formerly a professor of literature at IIT Madras, Srilata is currently distinguished. She's distinguished in many ways, but she's currently distinguished visiting professor at the SNU, Chennai. I'd like to call Catherine from the Goethe Institute and Nirmala Lakshman, chairperson of the Hidimbi, to kindly do us the honors and release Srilata's wonderful new book, followed by a conversation that she will have with our also beloved Balakrishnan of Theatre Nisha. So, ladies, if you will, Srilata, Catherine, Nirmala. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bala, if you will.
This is what they all said behind her back on the streets of Madurai. Look how she's fallen. Our arrogant Alli, they said. We saw this coming, they said. She who thought she was as good as a man is just another of Arjuna's wives now, they said. This is what happens to women who grow too big for their boots, they said. In the end, our Alli was easy to seduce. I would like to ask you some questions. Intrigued, of course, after having read your book. And Mahabharata, Itihasa, thus it happened, as it's mentioned. What is the starting point or the origin or the stimulus that led to this book?
Yeah, I think I might use a mic. Yeah, can you all hear me? Yeah, thank you for opening with that question. Because I think people who know my work I think this came to them as a surprise that I've come out with this collection of poems in the Mahabharata. Because firstly, I'm not a Sanskritist. I don't work in the space of mythology or epics. And I didn't really come to it from the space of devout, sort of a devout believer in Hinduism or anything like that either. So I think the thing is, the poems started to sort of write themselves at a point when I had just given up this 20-year career, fairly intense career as a professor, full-time professor, and so on. And it was a point when I think it was sort of a liminal space, so to speak, and it almost felt like everything that had happened to me was like passing, it was actually something I could see in my rear view mirror, right? And there was nothing ahead, even though I had actually quit in order to make the space and the time to write, right? So I sort of found myself in a very peculiar space where I had left this very intense, a career which I really enjoyed when I was doing. And I found myself almost like a writer without a subject, or a writer who didn't know what to write about, right? And the only thing I remember thinking about that I wanted to write, and I was journaling a lot quite intensely, was to actually write about the moment I was in at that moment, right? And having left, and what does the transition mean? But it was very new, very raw. It's perhaps a book I might want to write about in the future, but I wasn't ready to do that. So one of the first fallouts of my having left the job, as many of my friends who are here will testify to, and my family of course, is that I had to sort of suddenly find space for thousands of books that I had collected, and I had space for all of that in my office room, and I suddenly didn't have space at home, so it was given away, many books were given away and so on, but I had to still declutter my bookshelf. So that's a highly therapeutic activity which I recommend to all of you. And it was when I was doing that that I happened to see this book by Bhairab Parva, which is a retelling of the Mahabharata. I'm sure you know of that. And I just said, put down my duster and I said, okay, let me read this. What is it? And I didn't recall having bought the copy of the book. I don't know why I bought that book, but whatever it was, and I found myself sort of enthralled and enchanted by that. And then I reread something I had read once and written a review of, which is Bhima the Lone Warrior, translated from the Malayalam. In fact, Gandhari and Kunti, the translator, and MP's daughter is also here. They're here in the audience, so that's something very special for me. But, and I said, okay, I mean, this is just like such fascinating stories. And I then asked myself, I set myself a sort of an experiment. I said, what if I were to write poems based on these details, right? Because, okay, the canonical Mahabharata is one thing, the stories that I read as part of the Amachitrakatha in my childhood, what had sort of seeped into me by osmosis. It was all there, but I think it wasn't strong enough as a narrative. But I found these retellings very, very powerful and very, very new. And I said, what if I set this for myself as an experiment, and if I write poems based on these? And then gradually I also asked myself, what if I were to slip into the characters of the women in these epics and in the Mahabharata? And what sort of poems would come from there? You know? So I think it was that moment. I mean, that's what finally drew me to write. And it didn't feel like a book at that point, but I started to write, and more, as I wrote, I began to feel convinced that maybe there's a book there. And sometime towards the end of 2022, I had a residency at Sangam House, and I started working on it. It began to feel more real. And then I got a grant for it from the IFA. But of course, then the story doesn't end there, because then I had other personal challenges that came my way, and I had to actually give up writing. There was a long hiatus in between, and by the time I returned to it, it was a different Mahabharata. So it was another rebirth, actually, of something that was anyway.
Amazing. No trunk to this textual tree, but amazing roots. And somewhere Bhairappa's and Vasudevan Nayar's novels have reached out to you, and you have created this wonderful collection of poetry. And I recall when I first started reading these poems, I did have I was drawn to my days in National School of Drama when we used to work with haikus. And we use them for acting purposes. And I don't recall them in English. In Hindi, I do. You know, Basho's famous Tal Purana, Kuda, Dadur, Burut, and more like that. Your style is quite inspired by the way of Japanese poetry, if I may say so. Haikai and haiku. And is that something that you decided by choice, or is that the way your writing flowed? What was the...
So, a couple of things. One, I think the form of the dramatic monologue sort of suggested itself to me, because, since I needed to I decided that I was going to write from the perspective of these women characters. I had to have them tell their story out loud, and then there had to be this sort of a listener, a Sakhi. And around the time when I was actually working on these poems, or actually just before that, I had also been sort of working with another haiku poet, Gitanjali Rajan. I don't know if she's here today. But, and she actually mentored me, and that's the form that I really grew extremely fond of. And I think that was one form that I could actually write at any point, any day. I would just sit down and write a few haiku, and I somehow just enjoyed it. I loved that so much. I think it freed up something in me, right? And I think, so it sort of, there was no other way but for that to seep into the writing of these poems. And initially I thought of these poems as haibun, I mean as in like a prose narrative followed by a haiku hanging there like a pendant, but somehow that didn't work, and I sort of scrapped that, and then finally this is what I used. So yeah, there are haiku elements, haiku elements, so I'm glad you asked me.
because inside the Mahabharata, when we are reading it, if there is something even slightly incoherent or not understandable at first glance, there are another 100 stories which go around to actually explain and kind of blossom it for us. But when we read your poetry, it leaves a lot to our own introspection, to a lot to our own thought. So it's a very fresh way of looking at these perspectives. Why only women characters?
Okay. Right, so I think I've read over a period of time, also as a teacher of literature and so on, so many novels, so many poems, which seem to me to be only about men, or about sort of very sorts of narratives that revolve around men and their adventures and what they get up to in life, and it's a very sort of male perspective. So one thing obviously is for me to, I really felt a very strong need to redress that. I think that's one. And also I think this has been something that I've been very sort of aware of as somebody who was a working woman and as somebody who was a parent and was handling multiple things, that there are so many stories, so many things that women go through that really remain completely invisible. And of course there are so many feminist retellings and there's quite a lot of feminist literature and all of that. So you may argue that why another feminist retelling, but I think there is still space. I mean, it's such a relatively poorly addressed area of concern as far as I'm concerned, right? So I think that's where this comes from. And really, what happens if you train a feminist lens on the Mahabharata? What is it that comes from that, right? So I think that's the question that I was really that's the question I began to ask myself.
So now a question which asserts its rights to be asked is, why these women? How did you apply your sieve and remove an Uttara from it or a Subhadra from it? How did that happen?
Right. Thank you for that. I actually had a number of Madhavi poems, for instance. I think I did have one or two poems, Subhadra poems as well. But I think I wasn't able to sustain for whatever reason. I'm not able to give you a clear reason for that. But I think these were the women characters who stayed with me, and I was able to actually develop each of them, all the poems as sequences. I think so. These were the poems that finally lasted as sequences. But I do have a number of stray poems that some of them appeared in print and poetry and so on. But they're not part of the collection because they're just like really all over the place. Two odd poems about Madhavi. I think there was one poem of Subhadra and so on and so on. Yeah. But these were what worked, and I was able to. And I think for the about 60-65 poems that are there in this collection, there are easily another, I think about 35 to 40 poems that I just abandoned, that have not made it to the collection. Yeah.
Maybe another book?
No.
I mean, knowing your writing, an important pertinent question that does offer itself is the way our world is poised today, where we stand in terms of our politics, in terms of the kind of dialogues that we are having with each other. Does this collection of poetry also offer you a way of expressing your thoughts about what is around us today?
So, I think one thing I really strongly believe in as a writer is that anything creative that we do, and that any creative work that's not warmongering in a sense, right, is a little island of peace. And I think it's really important to build a collection of those islands. Maybe it's a very fragile way of responding to the horrors of the moment. I mean, we have Palestine, we have the horror of genocide, we have all sorts of things, that we hear about on a daily basis. And sometimes, yes, I do doubt myself and I wonder, what does it even mean that I'm sitting and writing and I'm even launching a book in the middle of all of this absolute misery and so on. But I think, we have to sort of come back, we have to sort of find ways to cope with these very, very difficult moments. And the other thing is, I think it's also, sort of sometimes unrealistic to write to the moment. This is something I've asked myself. Now there is this whole war. Like, should I not be writing about the war? Should I be sitting and writing about the Mahabharata? I mean, how does it even matter, right? Does it even matter today? But I think that's kind of an unrealistic thing to expect of an artist, also because it's just two rods, unprocessed, right? And when you must write about it is when you must write about it. I don't think one should do it when one is not ready, and when one is not, when one is not ready, right? Having said that, I mean, there is, for instance, as you know, wonderful poetry coming out from that difficult context of Palestine, from Palestinian poets, beautiful, wonderful poems that are really moving. And I think that should happen, that's happening and that should happen, right? So, that's my short answer.
Thank you for that. Now, we do understand that when the critical edition of the Mahabharata was compiled by the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, apparently around 1,650 different versions were gotten together. It was a huge, long process by the time they got it together. There was things that they negated, things that they kept. There was a very scholarly approach to the whole thing. So now, when you write these poems, your inspirations, where you come from, did it ever bother you that you are not sticking to a particular understanding of the Mahabharata, or that you are possibly favoring more of a folk adaptation, or of a, peculiar to a particular community? Was that something that bothered you?
No, it never bothered me. Though it did, I think I told you this also earlier when we had a brief discussion. I think what it worried me sometimes, when the book comes out, there are going to be these scholars of the Mahabharata, of the canonical Mahabharata, who are going to sit there and ask me tough questions about, like, did you read this version, that thing, this particular shloka? No, I didn't. I'm not a scholar of the Mahabharata in that very canonical sort of way, But I think I just flowed where my imagination took me, and I was, and it took me in the direction of these very wonderful retellings that I've cited and referenced in the book off and on, right? And I didn't worry about it, because I just approached it as a poet and not as somebody who was very tempted to hang on to one telling, or to say, oh my God, I mean, if I use this version, then there are like 100 other versions, no? Because then it can always be, I think the thing to ask yourself is, even the people who write from that very canonical space, they're making the mistake of not asking themselves what are the other versions that surround that canonical. So I think for me, it's a web, and I think it's a fascinating web, and the reason I think, if there's one reason why you should actually read the Mahabharata and familiarize yourself with the retellings, is that it's an open, porous text. I think it was always meant to be a text without one trunk, but with deep roots, and I think that's the spirit in which we should approach, whether it's the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, or maybe people won't like it, but I think that's the only way to see these texts.
Absolutely. As far as the Mahabharata is concerned, we also know that the first version of the Mahabharata was only 8,800 shlokas. It was known as Jaya.
Yeah.
The next version comes out for 24,000, then it is known as Bharatam. And by the time we know it as Mahabharatam with 85,000 plus shlokas, a long time has passed even from the context of the Mahabharata. So when you bring out your poetry, I think it just adds itself to what is existing in the multiverse of the Mahabharata in that sense. I would really love the audience also to ask questions of the poet. I'm sure there is a lot of intrigue and there's a lot of queries that you might have regarding.
Yes. You say it's footnotes to the Mahabharata. How do you justify the title? How do you justify the title? That it is footnotes to Mahabharata. Normally, a footnote means some sort of an explanation for the things inside. Number one. Number two, in the original Mahabharata, there is no Alli character. The Alli is one which is peculiar to Tamil Nadu. And Alli, Alli, there are a lot of Alli versions. And those are all things of Tamil, especially, not even South India. Then how do you take it to the, perhaps you wanted to mix it with the original Mahabharata. How do you take it like that?
Thank you for both questions. The question about footnotes. So the title was something I struggled with a lot. It was initially called Mahabharata off the record. And then somehow I think my editor also felt she just didn't like it, and I also got a little uncomfortable with that sort of title. And footnotes maybe because also I think my own life as an academic or a former academic or whatever, I think so much, in a footnote, the font size is really tiny, So if it's, the rest of it is font size 12, the footnote would be in font size 10 when you write a research paper, for instance. And it somehow seems on the page, when you look at it visually, the footnote seems to be the least important. And so unless you're a scholar or an academic, people have a habit of actually looking over the footnotes and not even reading the footnotes, right? I've actually sometimes told my students off because they don't read their footnotes properly in a text. Right? So it's not the main text, it's a footnote. And sometimes the footnote can be like a digression, and it can be a rabbit hole into which you fall, and then you discover other things, and then you're looking up those other things. It's like an internet rabbit hole in a sense. Right? And I think that's the spirit in which it was titled Footnotes to Mahabharata. Right? Literally small print, not so important, but actually hugely important, and carrying little stories of its own. Now, your second question, the Alli thing. So yes, you're absolutely right that Alli comes from the Tamil tradition. In fact, I also learned for a while, I assumed quite ignorantly, that must be part of the Tamil Bharata. So apparently it is not even part of that, the Tamil Bharata. It's actually part of the Kutu tradition. It is part of the Kutu tradition, it's part of the Villipatu and other kind of performative traditions. Right? And even that is fast disappearing because clearly, Bala would probably know more about this than me. But I've heard that there's just lack of monetary support for these performers, folk performers, to put up the Alli Kadai, and sometimes it comes up, suddenly, and you need to know the calendar and the schedule, right? So I think, but I did find some stories. I found research articles in the EPW of all the places. There's a wonderful scholar called Vijaya Ramaswamy who's actually looked at the whole Alli story and so on, and she got this big piece in the Economic and Political Weekly. So my own poems come from that, and yes, I deliberately wanted to actually have a Tamil twist to this whole thing, because we know, and this was not part of the original thing. It came down south, and this is later what we call a later interpolation. But having said that, as he also said, what is the original? We don't know, right? So I think I really feel we shouldn't worry about that, and the more the better. And
my part is I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yes.
In the beginning, you made a passing mention about the project that you were working on, literally. I think I read one of the poems, and we also spoke over the phone. I think there is a dialogue between the Villipatu style and also the Sangam poems, which are in the dramatic Poolala, which also you mentioned. I think this is a quite unique kind of fusion between the folk and the classical. Are you conscious of that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think again that is something that was not very conscious. The choice of it's almost like a mimicking of the Sangam poetics. What I've read in translation, right? Again, I don't read Old Tamil, I don't read Sangam Tamil at all, right? But I think those poems, somehow the poetics of that felt very appropriate for what I wanted to work on, right? So I don't know why and how that happened, but that happened. So there's that on the one hand, and as you say rightly, there's also the whole folk. So it's a fusion. Yeah, I didn't think of it like that until now. Thank you.
Why the Sakhi we
Uh,
Did it come naturally?
Yeah, no. That not very organically, I must say, because I thought about how do you write. This is really a sort of, in a sense, a psychological study, if you like, of the women characters that I'm writing about, and how do you get them to sort of say their story out, and what's and to whom would they say this, right? That's really important, because clearly, say, Draupadi can't speak to any of her husbands about some of the things that she's gone through, or none of the characters in the epics, women characters, could. When you look at them as stories, right? And I think the only I felt that perhaps these women would have only been able to speak freely to their women friends. So the Sakhi was something I said, okay, that would be a useful sort of character to bring into this whole theory.
On the need to read it, but since you said multiple women characters, right, I was wondering, when you were writing the poems, the voice of these women characters, like, are they distinct in your head, and how did they manifest in the poems themselves, right? Like, did you, can you recognize the different voices, and what would you say is different about them, either in the writing of it or when you read it later, right? Like, is it a distinct, was it a distinct process for different women, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, thank you. I hope I managed to sort of convey the fact that there are different voices. Because one of the things that I remember doing is that I wrote each of these as blocks. So I did the Ali poems one go, and then there was a bit of a gap or a hiatus, and then I moved on to the others. So that's why I was very conscious that I shouldn't mix up these voices. But then also remember that there is a Srilata writing all of this. So I think so I don't know how much of that meant in the sorts of questions they ask, what they say may at some level start sounding a bit alike, I suspect, right? Yeah, so there is that. But I did make that effort to keep them as distinct as I could. Yeah? Because this is the sort of thing I've never attempted before with any of my poems. So this is something quite new and really out of my comfort zone.
Is there a favorite of the 6 or 7?
We will read a few.
As in,
Favorite
was it
character.
favorite character among the 6 or 7?
I think Ali was by far my favorite character.
This poem is from the sequence of Alli. Says the innkeeper to Arjuna, our Alli has never needed a man. I am yet to meet a woman immune to my charms. Your Alli, I am sure, is no different, you say. Stranger, you will soon be eating your words. Full red lips, slender waist, raisin eyes, skin softer than jasmine, fearless to a fault, warrior beyond compare. Our Alli has never needed a man.
Says Ali to her friend, it's to myself I belong. Might as well accept your lot, you say. Make peace with things, learn to be a woman. Give up this foolishness. Ali, of what use are bows and arrows when Arjuna himself is yours? Whose side are you on, Tori? His or mine? It's to myself I belong, not to men who take me against my will. This has nothing to do with come, so don't sell me that story. Tori, after all that has come to pass, do you really expect me to become one of Arjuna's wives? The next poem is from the Hidimbi sequence. They say.
I would like you to read the poem on page 8, especially the last line. Our Ali can do better than a man. that is a crux of the in
Yeah. Okay, thank you. This is a poem from the Alli sequence. Says the Pandil came to the queen, more son than daughter. You raised this daughter of ours to be a warrior, and now she won't look at a man, you complain. But isn't it thanks to her, more son than daughter, that we have our kingdom back? Quit complaining and be glad. Our Ali can do better than a man. Oh yeah, I do. Sorry. Yeah. This is on page 19. This is from the Hidimbi sequence. Page number 19. They say that I give off a certain animal smell, that I am too much, too loud, too dark, too muscular, too wanton, that I am a sorceress and a thief, that if only I had thought to look in the mirror, I wouldn't have dreamt of a Kshatriya man, that a Rakshasi like me should know better, that good men should guard themselves against creatures like me, that trapped by the likes of us, they lose themselves. Polished flowers, biting my lips until they turn red. Polished flowers, biting my lips until they turn red.
Page 22 from the Hidimbi sequence. Beloved. Much was said on the morning they left. We can't possibly take her with us. It is unthinkable, Bhima. Be reasonable. Son, your time with her was borrowed time. In time, there will be other women. You can always visit her when the fancy takes you. She will soon be a distant memory. Take my word for it. A warrior must know when to move on. Don't be such a crybaby. But she is with child. Mother knows she is. She served us well. She wasn't bad for a Rakshasi. May you be blessed with a son, Hidimbi. On the morning they left, much was said. But I had ears, only for that one word of Bhima's. Beloved. Through my heart bird, the arrow of that word. Page 34 from the Draupadi sequence. Says Queen Prishati to King Draupadi. She sent for a quill. That daughter of yours is a strange one. She cares neither for jewels nor clothes. All day long she sits gazing out the window, lost in thought. Dressed in the dullest of garments, jasmine buds, her only jewels, that daughter of yours. Why? She is practically an ascetic. Only the other day she sent for a quill to write poems with, she said. What kind of prince will marry such a girl?
Page 48 from the Draupadi sequence. Says Draupadi to Sakhi Neetambari, what do I do with a man like this? He insists I go to him every night, that jealous Bhima. It's always some excuse or the other. I'm unwell, my stomach hurts, you fed me too much. Make me some kashaya, massage my feet, they hurt so. Stay with me until I fall asleep. Don't go, what's the hurry? And all the while, Sakhi, I'm thinking of Yudhishthira, whose turn it is with me. Surely he must wonder what's keeping me. This Bhima, Sakhi, is worse than a child. When I tell him I really must be on my way, he retreats into a sulk. Let me not hold you back, Draupadi, he says with a heavy sigh. Clearly your heart is with Yudhishthira. I'm nothing to you. I will go to Hidimbi. She is the only one who loves me. Sakhi, what do I do with a man like this?
Page 63 from the Gandhari sequence. Says Gandhari to her friend, can my eyes take the light? In last night dream, hill blue like the arch of an eyebrow. Sakhi, I remember the day as if it were yesterday. I was watching a peacock, the outspread of his wings, the blue glisten of his neck, in the singing rain when you came running. Princess, you have been deceived, the man is blind. Only that morning you had lined my eyes with kohl. A princess without kohl in her eyes is no princess. Sakhi, I did what good wives do. I walked in his shoes. And what if you had been blind, princess? Would he have walked in yours? 100 sons I bore him, and one daughter. And I know not their faces, dear Sakhi, except what I see with my fingers. But mine, unlike his, is an imperfect seeing, since I came to it so late. My fingers do not see the blue-hued hills, nor do my ears pick up the tilt of Duryodhana's head. And to think, Sakhi, he sees it all. The way I did that peacock singing in the rain. Oh, There are days when I long to undo the knot just to know Dushala's smile. But what keeps you, princess? I wonder, Sakhi, can my eyes take the light? Will the world take color and shape? Will you line my eyes with coal again? Sakhi, will I see even less than I do now?
Page 74 says Gandhari to her friend, grief's saddest language. Piercing the palace walls, grief's saddest language speaks in the wordlessness of a mother's dirge. Wrapped in the shroud of death's long sleep is her foot soldier son, and still the men maintain that the war was imperative.
Page 80 from the Kunti sequence. Says Pandu to Kunti, keep your thoughts on me, like the practiced hunter whose eyes remain always on his prey. Keep your thoughts on me. The pleasures of the body are as fleeting as dreams. They retreat in the blink of an eye. But our hearts, Kunti, must remain unsullied. Lotus leaves in a pond.
Page 83 from the Kunti sequence says Kunti to her friend, like the pug marks of a wild animal. Like the pug marks of a wild animal, Maruda's impress on me. And yet, Sakhi, you stand there saying, forget him, he's not for you.
So that was some of the poems that we wish to read in front of all of you today. If there are any questions following that rendering.
Talk about Maruta. That Marut is some sort of a demigod described in Mahabharata. What is this Maruta mean? Marut is a demigod, or is the god of forest or green or something. This Maruta is the same?
No, this Maruta is from Bhairava's Parva, actually. He's a character who's supposed to be a deva, who's actually part of a human clan of people called the Devas. And so Bhairava tells it not as mythology or, none of them are gods or whatever, right? They're just human beings, and he meets, so this is actually a clan of people called the Devas, and Kunti falls in love with Maruta, who's from that community.
Yeah, hello ma'am. I just wanted to ask you if there were any autobiographical elements with specific characters, apart from, we get the generals and stuff like women being subjugated. And I was also wondering what it felt like. Sure, we cannot determine which Mahabharata is the original one, there are so many versions, but ultimately you're embodying and trying to live a woman who's from a very different time. So that much you're agreed upon. So sometimes, for instance, if I tried to do that, it would feel a little deceptive in some ways, right? Because we can live that moment, but not really, because the times were so different. So I just want to know how you navigated that experience.
Yeah, that's a question, quite a tricky question actually. Yeah, these are not contemporary women. Those are not the sort of lives I have ever led. And one can't sort of beyond a point stretch an argument that there are these universal problems that all women across eras, across centuries have faced. Not at all. First of all, this is shrouded in myth and retellings, and there's all of that. But as I said, I think how I came to it is that the stories themselves and the characters, real flesh and blood women, they came to me, they just felt so vibrant, so alive. It's almost as though I could actually have a dialogue with them, right? And no, there are no clearly identifiable autobiographical elements in this, and that's why it's very different from my other work, which has tended to have a lot of autobiographical elements to it, right? But this is really a leap of faith and a leap of imagination. And sometimes you have to suspend disbelief also. And I mean, of course, there's no need way of knowing how would Kunti have really felt then or how would Draupadi have no, right? But this is really an imaginative recreation. That's it. There's no claim to this is how they felt. This is exactly how they must have felt. No.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that answers
It
some of
does,
that.
thank you.
Hello. I was just wondering whether all these women at some point or the other, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, they all interacted with Krishna. Is there any thought you had given to the way the women interacted with Krishna? Because ultimately he was the Sutradhara.
Yeah, thank you for that. Like, but I have not really, I think, incorporated that, the element of Krishna being the Sutradhar. That's not really part of the way I thought about these poems. But if you read the Draupadi sequence, Krishna is a very important presence in that particular sequence.
Thank you for the readings, they were really lovely. I just want to ask you, as he asked you right at the beginning, why did you stop with these women and all? So my question is, how did you know that you were finished with this thing?
Thank you, Srilata. Yeah, I think it just came from an organic conclusion. I mean, in the sense, I just felt I'm done with this. I actually worked on it, though I mean the size of the book is not going to sort of indicate that I worked on it for years, but I had, and there were breaks, there were interruptions, and each time I would go back, there would be something else I wanted to say, and I would just really discard a lot of the older drafts, and a lot of characters just got pushed into the dustbin literally. But I think there was a point when I felt, okay, this is what I really, this is the chunk or the sculpture that I'm producing and that I want to produce, and I don't want the rest of it. I don't want the rest of the stone or the rest of the wood or whatever, right? And you know, this is that slim thing that I want to say. And I just knew it, and I thought, okay, this is, and after that, of course, there is some division and editing, all of that happens, but I think there was a really organic point when I knew that I was done with the telling.
On that note, we're done with this evening. Srilata will be delighted to sign copies of her book which are outside, so please do support wonderful literature and poetry and buy a copy. And thank you all for being here, and thank you very much to the Goethe Institute for collaborating with us. Thank you, Bala, for this wonderful reading and interview, and most of all, thank you once again, Srilata, for sharing with us and giving us footnotes to come out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say a little, sorry.
Footnotes are Ramayana.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to, firstly to all of you who having turned up on a Friday evening, and I know that it was a big effort of will and just sometimes sheer loyalty or whatever, somebody who keeps writing these books, God knows why, but thank you for coming, and big thank you to Prakriti Foundation, to Ranveer, Harish, Meera, Prathna, and others, and a big thank you to the Institute, to Katharina, to Nirmala Lakshman, who I know somehow made time for this. She was really busy today, but she was kind enough to come. And thank you also to Geeta of the Goethe Institute. And a very big thank you to Bala, whom it's the first time I'm actually meeting him face to face. Thank you for writing today. He also was traveling for a bit part, so he had to come back and catch up. Thank you. Thank you all.